Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to the second part of my year in review special. I am now going to rank, my top games of 2023 that came out in 2023 against the rest of the games that we played and streamed this year. Now, some of these games were on my channel. Some of these games were on Keith's channel. Some of them I just played on my own. I don't think there's too many of those, but if you don't go looking for a playthrough for every single one of these on my channel, you won't find one. I think there's a few things here that I just kind of played on my own time, like Spider-Man 2, for example. But Vampire Survivor is another one. But yeah, we'll just kind of get in. This list is probably going to be a lot shorter, despite having more things on it than the last one, because I'm not going to go super in depth about every single game here. And I'm going to do it in just sort of whatever order I want, because I think that will be fun. And of course, I'll be talking about the games as I have played them. Some of them were not completed in the year, but are on their way to being completed. Stuff like Thief, which I've played a pretty significant amount of for the channel. Stuff like Password, which we will talk about. And then some of these are also replays. Like I'd already played Fallen Order. I played that game when it came out, but I replayed it this year. I streamed it. So just one of those things to put on the list. So let's get started. Cool. All right. Let's talk about some easy ones first. Last of Us Part 1. Still as good as ever. I played the PS5 remake of Last of Us Part 1. I did it HUDless on Grounded as part of my channel. You can go find an LP for that. It's pre-recorded, so there's no chat if that is not something you like. It used the old layout, the old avatar, but you will enjoy Last of Us Part 1. It is a very well-written game. It has extremely excellent encounter design, and really great mechanics, especially on Grounded. It is of my opinion that these games are not meant to be played on story difficulty. You should be playing them on Grounded. They feel designed for Grounded. The higher level of fidelity that the AI has on those difficulties just changes that game completely and really makes every single mechanical choice shine. I'm constantly changing my strategies, adapting, going for things that I wouldn't normally go for in a playthrough where I can just blast through everything with guns. It really changes the resource economy because enemies die faster, but so do you, which is really interesting. Just really stellar game. Following that up, Last of Us Part 2. Right there. One of the best games ever made. Played that HUDless Grounded as well. That game is a fucking achievement. Right up there somewhere between Baldur's Gate 3, Alan Wake 2. Might even be above Alan Wake 2. Might even be somewhere. This is going to be super hard to quantify. This is one of the best games I've ever played. Its AI is next level. There is almost nothing on the planet that compares to encounter design in this game. It is a truly impressive and special game when it comes to just pure mechanical gameplay. Narratively, it is maybe the most well-written game I've ever played. It is just so invested in examining characters and examining things that other games and narratives don't even like to touch. And what I mean by that is not just like darkness or poor decision making or being emotionally motivated, but I mean like this is a game about how love and hate are often the same thing. And how love, the thing that so many people purely explain and motivate as the reason to live life and in a good for the world, is actually maybe the single most corruptive force, the single thing that hurts us the most, the single thing that hurts other people the most. It posits conflict as almost entirely motivated by love, self-love, love for others, love for mutually exclusive status quos. and that is hard to deal with. Like, the characters in this game are truly, truly messed up people. Like, they make bad choices and they hurt themselves, and they don't make logical decisions. They make decisions that are motivated entirely on this love that pushes them to do horrible things. And that is so interesting. It was so interesting to play a story with characters this beloved that manages to play off the themes of the first game and the ending of the first game in a way that is not just settling for a narrative that is happy and positive and good in the end. This game is a game of profound tragedy and loss, and Ellie is perhaps the single saddest character and most tragic character in any video game I've ever played, most certainly, maybe any piece of fiction I've ever consumed. That's all I'm going to say. If you want to know more about my thoughts on this game, I did a multiple tens, dozens of hours long playthrough, episodic playthrough of both of these games. HUDless on the hardest difficulty. Go watch those on the channel. It would do me a solid. But yeah, I don't know if I would put it above or below Alan Wake 2. Somewhere around here. Somewhere around here. Probably up here. So we'll just leave it like that. Cool. Let's knock out some other easy ones. I already sort of talked about Jedi Fallen Order. It's going to go probably up here. Maybe right here. That sounds about right. Jedi Fallen Order, great game. Great Star Wars. Everything I wanted to say about Fallen Order I said in the previous video, so if you haven't watched that, go watch that. But to summarize, it is the most Star Wars has ever been since the OT. It kicks off a really great character arc. It has a plucky, optimistic examination of how to get past trauma and oppression and damage done to you while also finding a found family, which is all very Star Wars, but also it is ultimately a story about the obligation we have to the people around us and our ownership even over them and our responsibility to them. And yeah, it's a great game. It's a really great game. Very interesting. Lots of things to say about the Jedi Order, about Star Wars in general, about the legacy of Star Wars. And it's just really, really worth talking about. Really worth playing. So Jedi Fallen Order, great game. Not as good as Survivor, but very good. Also, one of the best maps in gaming, just as an aside. Really great Metroidvania style Metroid Prime map. Let's get out another easy one. Marathon. Marathon is one of the first PC shooters with mouse look. It's actually a game that was released on Mac. It's Bungie's first really big breakout hit, story-based first-person shooter. I liked it. It was an interesting game to try to stream. It was a really bad stream game, so there are no VODs that exist for it. But for a game from 1994, holds up pretty well. I really like the lore. It's primarily told in text logs and emails, similar to a System Shock or anything like that. It's got a really fun kind of visual design, but at the end of the day, Doom clone with mouse look in space with weird Lovecraftian sci-fi elements. Pretty cool stuff. Pretty good game. Let's talk about some other interesting things. Actually, I think it might be good to go through the Castlevania games because a lot of them are going to end up kind of grouped together in the same tiers. And there's a lot of them, so it will like thin out the ranks pretty well. So I'm going to just rank them and then talk about Castlevania as a whole. that all of them? Is that all the Castlevanias? Oh, Dracula's Curse. Yeah. Something like this, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. All right. So this is all the Castlevania games ranked. Let me just double check. That's all of them. It is. All right, cool. All the Castlevania games ranked. Symphony of the Night, best game in the series that we've played so far. Really just the poster boy of the Metroidvania genre. Just a nearly perfect game. Incredible soundtrack. Got some balance issues. Exploration isn't really rewarded because most of the items you pick up don't have a lot of flavor text that informs how you play, and also most of them are just like not very. Just most of them are not very interesting. You get one sword and it's just numerically better, so you don't use any of the others. So that's an issue. But as an exploratory experience of exploring the castle, fitting in a mood, learning about the evolution that the series had to go through to continue, the abandonment of the Belmonts and sort of the curse of their clan existing as a thing that has cursed Castlevania itself as a franchise, moving on to Alucard, experimenting with new things. Symphony of the Night is just the tippy top. Multiple playthroughs. We did every single character in this game as we did for every single Castlevania game on this list. Of course, Symphony of the Night has Alucard and Richter on the PlayStation version, Maria on the Saturn version, and Maria on the PSP version. Those are two separate characters. They play differently. Played them all. And there's just so much game to play. It's so much fun. The way that you change up movement especially is different depending on the character. I love Richter mode. I think it is so enjoyable. It was hard. We had a tough time for some of those bosses. Hell, even Galamoth. Galamoth in Maria mode, even in broken Maria mode, was tough. But yeah. These games are something so special. The Symphony of the Night is as worthy of the praise as it seems. I think a lot of people enjoyed those playthroughs because I'm pretty knowledgeable about those games. It's just like a source of passion of mine, right? Like Castlevania is one of the most important series of all time to me, and this game is one of the reasons why. It's just its quality is self-evident. So highly recommend people check that out. If they want to play a Castlevania game, you can very easily jump straight into Symphony of the Night, even if you've never played another Castlevania game, and it's fine. You really don't need to worry about, the lore of Castlevania to enjoy Castlevania. So yeah, don't get stressed about any of that stuff. You don't need to worry about that sort of thing. But yeah. I think overall, Symphony of the Night is the big crowning achievement of that series. Really special game. Just really special game. Worth playing. So, that's that. Rondo of Blood is next. The best Classicvania. I think no one would disagree that these two are the best games in the series. Pretty close. People will argue about games that we haven't played yet. But I think these two games are sort of the standout titles. What is there to say about Rondo? Splitting paths, multiple characters, a really huge refinement from Dracula's Curse, which is right here, a little bit lower in that A tier. Dracula's Curse is limited by its sort of technical limitations. I would love to see Dracula's Curse if it was made nowadays. I'd love to see another Classicvania in its vein. And in fact, we have Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is just modern Dracula's Curse, and it's so good. It's so good. Way better than Ritual of the Night, which we'll get into when we play that game at the end of the Castlevania series. But Dracula's Curse, pretty good. Rondo of Blood, just a masterpiece. Just a masterpiece of boss design, level design. Really refined take on the Classicvania formula. So, love that. Down in B tier, we have Harmony of Dissonance and Order of Ecclesia. Harmony of Dissonance I have way higher than I expected to. Harmony of Dissonance gets a bad rap because it has really garish colors and bad audio. Thankfully, in our playthrough, we were able to mod the colors to be less oversaturated, so make up for the fact that the Game Boy screen was so dark. And the audio wasn't that bad. There's a lot of good tunes in that game. It's just low quality synthesizing. Really fun systems with the item crash mechanics and the magic system, so to speak. Juste is a fun character. Maxim mode is crazy. Maxim mode is so much fun. You're so mobile. You have these wild moves to use. He's probably the second most OP Castlevania protagonist, other than Saturn Maria. Really just stellar stuff. I really enjoyed that game, and navigating between the two castles and figuring out where to go was just a lot of fun. A really well, people thought the map was kind of poorly designed, and I think that's true. I think once you get more stuff unlocked and you have to go pixel hunting to find new things in each one, navigating between them can be kind of a pain in the ass. But for a game as short as it is, and as exploratory and sort of interesting transitionally as it is, Harmony of Dissonance is a great game. Right after that is Order of Ecclesia. Order of Ecclesia was really good. It's the most story-focused Castlevania since like Symphony of the Night. It's got a lot of and what I mean by that is like individual character growth, not like narrative. The game is really interested in Shinoa and her relationship to Albus, and there's a lot of cutscenes and stuff like that in it that a lot of other Castlevania games just don't have. But overall, I think it's a little bit weaker than the others because even though its gameplay is kind of fun and interesting, it has like a proto Souls-like stamina system, and it ostensibly has like cool combinations of souls that you would use sigils to get different weapons and different passives. I never really played with it. I never really felt like I had to. You just really equip 2 of the same good weapon against the enemy that you're fighting, and then you alternate the whole time, and then you're out of mana, and you dodge a little bit to get your mana back, and then you just do it again, and you DPS them down. That's a problem with all Castlevania games, but especially in Order of Ecclesia, which is a very linear, very, very grind-heavy game. If you want to get all the souls or sigils, you want to get, I guess they're called glyphs. That's what they're called. Get all the glyphs, get all of the side quests done. It's just so grindy. The side quests being tied to random chance chests sucks. It's so bad. There is a fan patch on romhacking.net to decrease or increase the item drop rate. Trust me. Get it. It will make the game better. There's no reason why the game was balanced the way it was. It is stupid how limited the resource economy is. The game isn't even really punishing. It's just tedious. So all you're saving is time. Play Order of Ecclesia. It's pretty good. From there, Castlevania Chronicles. It's Castlevania 1, but easier and with prettier art and an interesting soundtrack. What is there to say about that? Pretty much nothing. I like it. It's pretty good. I might put it down here, actually. It might be down here. Right next to that, we have the Adventure Rebirth. Adventure Rebirth was, again, sort of a remake, reimagining of Castlevania the Adventure on Game Boy. It is better than that game. Got really interesting level design, really tough bosses, so some really, really brutal maps. Like, it's a Castlevania game for people who really like Classicvania, and I really like that. Weird WiiWare title. But hey, I mean, it was cool. It had really great remixes of other Castlevania music, really fun stuff in that game. So yeah, those are kind of neck and neck. There's no real order between these two. If you like Classicvania after playing Rondo of Blood, give Castlevania Chronicles and Adventure Rebirth a try. You'll probably enjoy them. Then we have Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge. Belmont's Revenge, kind of stinky. It just is a really limited game. That's really the best way to describe that. Really, really limited game. There wasn't much they could do, right? So you're just going through, 7, 8-ish Castlevania levels, and then you're just kind of done. It just sort of ends. There's not too much special going on there. But it is interesting. It's a neat game. Neat game, highly recommend. if you like Game Boy games, trying it out, because it is one of the best kind of OG Game Boy games. From there, that would be the last one on the list, if not for Simon's Quest. I would say Simon's Quest is a little bit better than Belmont's Revenge, but not by much. Again, technological boundaries, right? It's got some real bullshit grinding. If you're playing the original NES cart and not a retranslated cart, the lying gossip system is terrible. You're going to get lost. It's on a time limit, and the time limit is really strict. We barely made it past the finish line to get the good ending. And we were playing pretty quick and pretty efficiently. You're doing all your grinding in mansions. Kettle says Simon is the hottest Belmont, though. Maybe in Chronicles, definitely not in Simon's Quest. The only thing hot about Simon is the fact that he's got a fever. But yeah, that's those games. And then finally, we have the last two Castlevania games. We have Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness. They're in the D tier. These games suck. They're so bad. Lament of Innocence is one of the worst 3D Metroidvanias I've ever played. The levels themselves seem Metroidvania-y, but they're actually super linear, just like Order of Ecclesia. It's a really bad, really repetitive 3D action game. It fails at being the sort of Devil May Cry thing that it was sort of going for. It kind of was developed concurrently against Devil May Cry, so it's not like gonna be, it's not fully aping them, but it's just not good. It's just not a good game. Yoahim mode is kind of interesting, but even then it's kind of brain off nonsense. And then Curse of Darkness is just so long. It's so long and so boring and so tedious. Its upgrade mechanics are nonsense. And the fact that you can upgrade into a worse version of your weapon just as a fuck you gotcha to get joke weapons is so unfathomably terrible. Like, it's just the worst feeling game. I'm going to be super honest here. While we were playing Curse of Darkness, I was literally regretting doing Castlevania as a series marathon because I was like, I need to get through this shit. I need to get through it. I need to move. I need to get this character fast. So I looked up the speedrun routes so that I could move quickly and figure out what the fastest movement option was, just so that I could reduce the amount of time that was spent just fucking walking around in that game. Because, oh my god, is that game tedious. It is just so awful. So, yeah, that game was pretty rough. Curse of Darkness might be worse than Wo Long. I mean, Lament of Innocence might be worse than Wo Long. It might be like this. This might be what we're looking at here. It's pretty rough. Yeah, oof. All right. That gets those out of the way. You want to do another franchise? Let's do Silent Hill. Woo! All right. Silent Hill is somewhere up here. Where's SH2? Probably like that. Yeah. Yeah, probably like that. Silent Hill 2, one of the best survival horror games of all time. Just one of the most well-written games of all time. It is a stone cold classic for a reason. It's really amazing stuff. Highly worth playing. It does have the downside of just like being kind of not a good game to play. I have never been one of the people who has bought into the idea that like you're weak in Silent Hill on purpose to make you feel unempowered. Because you aren't. Like James and Harry and Heather are killing machines. You get so many resources in these games. We were playing them on hard, and while I did struggle against like the final bosses of those games, for the most part, we had plenty of resources the whole game. We were never really threatened outside of getting clipped by enemies. I talked a lot about these in the playthrough, so you can go watch the playthrough if you want to hear my really deep thoughts. But Silent Hill 2 is still a very ludonarratively interesting game that kind of makes you engage with its weird cerebral nature. A lot of its puzzles get you into a really weird place mentally, which then it then weaponizes to constantly throw weird idiosyncrasies at you. And this is especially apparent in Silent Hill 2 and 3, even more so than Silent Hill 1, where Silent Hill 1 is more of a down-to-earth. It's weird to say down-to-earth because it's like one of the most supernatural games compared to the other two, but Silent Hill 1 is a much more like, as you would expect, survival horror game about like a literal hell dimension. So it's very interested in more being like a serious, weird story, and it just comes off really strange because it's Japanese people making a game about a place that they've basically never been, which is fine. Kind of aping like Lynch and Cronenberg and like weird horror and stuff that was very popular and influential. So it has an interesting perspective. Silent Hill 2 and 3, on the other hand, are like much more holistically written narratives. Silent Hill 3 is lower on the list because it's just very plot driven. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in Silent Hill 3 and a lot of really good theme writing and character writing in Silent Hill 3, but I still think Silent Hill 3 ultimately feels less like it's saying something than it is just being a sequel to Silent Hill 1. Like, I do think that the game has a lot of things to say, but it's more like it just kind of says things sometimes and has like a kind of cohesive theming overall to it. It doesn't feel like the game was made in the same way that Silent Hill 2 was to make a specific point. And its focus on combat and its mechanics, I think, ultimately also don't really tie into any of that. Like, a lot of the moment-to-moment stuff you do in Silent Hill 3 doesn't really feel like it is that tied to like Heather's arc as a character. There are moments that do, and like symbols and ideas that and aesthetics that float around that are like, oh, this is about like womanhood and the oppression of women in the modern world and maturity and growing into oneself and like losing one's father and all these things. But even me just describing it right now, it's so broad. Whereas like Silent Hill 2 is so focused that I can literally just describe what that game is about in such a succinct way that you wouldn't have to play the game. Like, it's very interesting that the series' highest point is that. And then it kind of falls back into the plot-driven sort of more broad theming and symbology of the original Silent Hill with Silent Hill 3. So, and just to state, like, me putting a game here, because people know that I love Silent Hill 2, me putting a game in A tier is not me saying it's not like an amazing game or it's not a must play. I would say everyone should play every single game in the S and A tier. It's just the thing that prevents Silent Hill 2 from being absolutely S tier to me is just the fact that it's not a very good game. It's a really great narrative packaged in a extraordinarily mundanely functional video game. And it doesn't use any of that mundanity in like a particularly interesting way. Silent Hill 2 can be consumed as a film or a book. It literally can be. People have edited it to make it work like that using camera hacks, and there is literally a novel adaptation of Silent Hill 2, and you can pretty much get the same experience out of it. So do what you will. You miss the great cutscenes, of course, if you're reading the book version, but give it a try. That is that. All right. Cool. Silent Hill. Let's kill some more survival horror here because I have one more. Rule of Rose. This game stinky. Rule of Rose is a really bad game. It has an interesting story and it's told really poorly. Rule of Rose is a game that I respect a lot. Because I like what they were trying to do and I value their ambition. They did not deliver on it, and it plays like garbage. And not garbage, again, in the Silent Hill 2 way of, like, interest, like, you know, you're just kind of a guy walking around in, like, an otherwise functional game. Rule of Rose is just broken. It's just broken. Like, the mermaid fight, like, just sucks for no reason. It's got weird hitboxes. The teacher fight, or whatever it is, a janitor fight, I don't know, a headmaster, he has like a frame zero invincible command grab reversal that hits full screen. He's an SNK boss in a survival horror game where you don't have control fidelity. And it never made me feel weak. It never made me feel connected to Jennifer. It just felt like they didn't know how to design a boss. And that's kind of the whole game. That's like every single aspect of the mechanics. You know, the fight with the weird crow heads that we got stuck on for like 45 minutes that I had to edit out of the LP, or like the random fish boys that fall on you when you're walking around the catwalks. Like, Rule of Rose's story might be interesting, but it's interesting in the way that you read like the Wikipedia article of a movie you don't think makes sense can be interesting. Gameplay wise, it's hot garbage, and that brings down its narrative by the end, because by the end I was just like, thank God it's over, you know? Just thank God it's over. That's what I was really thinking at the end of Rule of Rose, and I don't regret playing it. It was a fun thing to do for the channel. It's a very funny game. It's very unhinged, but it's funny in the way that like a bad movie is funny. And if you know anything about me, you know that I don't believe there's any such thing as something that's so bad it's good. I think you can derive enjoyment out of bad things, and I definitely derived a lot of enjoyment out of Rule of Rose, but I still think it sucks shit. So, there's that. Let's do some more survival horror. Talking about games that are not very good. Let's move on to Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame is barely better than Rule of Rose. The same combat encounters repeated constantly, the same 3 puzzles repeated constantly through a profoundly padded game. People praise the folkloric aspects and the tone and the aesthetics of Fatal Frame, and I think that all of that is commendable, but I think it's commendable in the way that buying a costume for your child on Halloween is commendable. You can tell when some people put more money and thought into it than others, and you can tell when people make their own outfits, but it's still just a Halloween costume that's going to be disposed of immediately after. That's how I feel about Fatal Frame. There really is nothing special about this game. I do not understand why people like it so much. Playing it was just so boring. The combat never changes. The limited resources are really weird and brutal. Fights are really poorly balanced, and part of the reason for that is that enemies are just off screen most of the time. And every single video review or essay or review that I've read about this game are like, you know, you're stuck waiting for just the right chance, and that ties into the fact that you're getting a perfect picture. But in practice, 95% of what this is you staring at a wall because you know where the ghost is, and then the ghost is just wiggling back and forth behind the wall while you wait for him to appear. It's just so void of anything interesting, and I don't think it really has anything to say either. It's a very traditional, tropey story about like moving through a place where bad things happened. And people, especially Westerners, especially Americans, will say things like, well, that's just like the Japanese idea of nuance and ghosts, and there's a lingering trauma that you must confront, but you can never. Isn't it so deep and just culturally valuable? But I can tell you, as someone who has been speaking Japanese since I was 10, who's literally lived and gone to school in Japan, like, yeah, that might be a cultural trope that appears in Japanese mythology and in Japanese horror, but like that doesn't, like, you can do more with that. In fact, I've seen Japanese things do more with that than Fatal Frame. It really is just aesthetically boring and stuck to the idea of doing nothing to pad out a game. It's not doing nothing to set a tone, it's doing nothing to pad out a game, which is really frustrating. Moving forward from that, Fatal Frame 2, ooh, Crimson Butterfly. Crimson Butterfly is way better than the first Fatal Frame, but still suffers from all the same issues. It's got a better narrative. It's got more interesting things to say. I would say it probably has the best, just like start to finish written narrative in the series. I don't think it has the best holistic narrative because there's still just a lot of shit that happens in that game that is still in that broad kind of wooby undefined space. And it's just, it's still bogged down by awful combat and awful puzzles and just the slowest walk speed in any game. I feel like every single Fatal Frame has a character that just walks slower than the last. which is a bummer. But that's where we get to the best Fatal Frame game that we played, which was Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented. Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented is a really interesting, bizarro tone piece Metroidvania survival horror game, which is weird. It's a fully open, map that you can explore pretty much all of, that you're collecting keys to open gates to go to different areas, but you're still constantly looping back on yourself and exploring in this mansion that is progressively getting larger in a radial as your abilities and as the needs of the plot change. You're constantly going back to a hub overworld where you are examining things and getting different status updates from your characters, and it ties into Fatal Frame 1 and ties into Miku and shows what happened after the events of the first game for her. Fatal Frame 3 gets a bad rap because it's very overlong and it's much less focused than Fatal Frame 2. But one of the things that I think benefits from that is that Fatal Frame's issue was never its never a lack of focus. In fact, oftentimes it's so focused on doing J-horror in like a very traditional way that it loses its ability to comment on other things and take benefit from its wider aesthetics. Fatal Frame 3 might have a kind of irritating character swapping system and a Metroidvania map, and it might be filled with too many ideas. But all of those ideas speak in concert with each other about grief and loss and legacy. It is the Fatal Frame game that builds off of every other Fatal Frame game. It's a sequel to Fatal Frame 1 and Fatal Frame 2, while also being its own story. It is a little bit overstuffed, and the arbitrary connections that the characters have in this game is just like very bizarre. But overall, I think it works really well. It is a very solid game. Where is the last one? Did I forget to upload that one? Man, I need to recount my thing. Where is Fatal Frame 4? I'll upload it really quickly. Oh, I probably downloaded an image that was like animated or something. Didn't get the one I needed. There we go. Fatal Frame 4, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. Fucking dog shit video game. This game was bad. This game might actually be the worst game that we played all year. We did play, so this was a remaster. It technically did come out in 2023, but it is just a bog standard remaster of a game that came out in 2007, I want to say. Don't fact check me. It's 2007 through 2009. I don't remember when. It was a Wii game. Holy hell is this game bad. It has the worst combat, the most tedious combat of any Fatal Frame game. Its character switching is incredibly nonsense. Its story is awful. It's so finicky. Things never worked. Things were, the game's just glitchy and buggy. My camera kept becoming desynced from my character. And I don't mean my camera like my camera that I'm fighting with. I mean my literal third-person camera in the game kept wandering away from me. The character from this game, Ruka, has just the worst walk speed ever. Again, it's one of the most padded out survival horror games I've ever played. And its story is terrible, even compared to other Fatal Frame games. This game was awful. And I'm saying that as someone who really likes Suda51, has played Moonlight Syndrome, and put up with that game too. Everything that this game is trying to comment on, is trying to integrate, is like serving as a second chance on a lot of the ideas in it. It just doesn't come together. It does not work. It is so bad. Maybe it was better on Wii, I don't know, but it is also the start of some of the worst gimmicks in the Fatal Frame franchise, and I would argue was the beginning of the end for this series, because it is indicative of every single bad decision that they would go on to make in Fatal Frame 5, which is a game that everyone hates. So, the Tsukihami no comment is just so bad. It's just so terrible. Let's clear out the rest of the remakes on the list. I think there's only one on here. Yeah. Destroy All Humans. Like right here. It's fine. It was a game I rented when I was a child, and I had some nostalgia for it. It has not aged very well, and there's not a lot to do. It's pretty shallow. It's too long for what it is, and I probably could have beat it in a night off stream, but streaming it was a little painful, and there was nothing to talk about because the NPCs just repeat the same 5 jokes over and over again. Glad I got it out of the way. It was fun to revisit from that perspective. The Destroy All Humans is the perfect example of a game that would be great in an economy where video game rentals were still a thing. It's a game you can finish in a weekend when you have your friends over. It's kind of like a light, goofy mayhem game. I don't know if anyone needs to play it anymore. It's not worth checking out at all. I don't think it's worth really going out of your way to play. But it was a good, it's a good distraction. Cool. What else do we want to get out of the way? Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1. Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 is a reimagining of Sherlock Holmes adventure games. This game was bugged as hell. It was so unintentionally funny. It was a really bad adventure game. I do not think anything worked. It was an open world adventure game where you're also doing puzzles, and the puzzles need to be solved in a specific order. And it also tries to have branching paths in its narrative. It just doesn't work. We also played the console version, which is terrible. That was my mistake. I had a gift card, and I bought it with a gift card, I think. Yeah, Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1, terrible game, awful writing. John is probably the single most unhinged. Like, if you want to have a good time on my channel, go watch the fever dream that is the Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 playthrough, because I felt high playing that game. Like, it was insane. There are just that game is The Room. Like, it's very much in that same vein of things that people think is so bad it's good. Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 is a nightmare disaster of a video game. It has some of the funniest characters, some of the weirdest puzzles and asks and leaps in logic. It is a massive failure of the Sherlock Holmes property, but hey, good on them for trying something, right? It was a lot of fun, even if it was just dog water. Just really not a good game. So that's that, I guess. Let's talk about some other stuff. I can bang out a few pretty good things, pretty quick things here. System Shock. This is going to be close to System Shock Remake, except it's like probably like down here-ish. Let's put it like right there. Yeah, like right there. It's the same as System Shock Remake, but less. It's older, so you get to see the evolution of the industry. Every single thing I said about System Shock in the last video applies, but it's a very early sim. It's pretty experimental, does a lot of cool things, has great writing, very fun, very easy game. We played it in a single sitting. I did 14 hours in a single sitting, and I got the game banged out. Wasn't very hard, so go ahead and go give that a try. It's a cool game. Once you get over the control hurdle of playing an older game with weird controls, you'll probably get a lot out of it. It's very impressive what they did at the time. All right, let's look at other stuff. Yeah, let's do Baroque next. Baroque's probably right here. Yeah. So Baroque is at the high end of B tier. Baroque's story is really cool. Baroque's narrative is really interesting. Aesthetically, it's incredible and it has amazing music. The downside to Baroque is that it's like mechanically not particularly interesting. It is cool from a historical context. Baroque is a roguelite dungeon crawler where you're constantly cycling through an endless dungeon. It has like 30 floors on the PS1 version. Constantly cycling through in order to achieve endings. It has a few different endings, I think. I think we got the best one. It is a really cool fragment of an idea that feels like an indie game. It is not an indie game, really. But for the time, massively innovative, weirdly influential for a game hardly anyone has played. Really fascinating. One of the things that people might not know about how I played that game, though, was that I also read all of the assorted materials that have been translated for Baroque, because Baroque has a lot of secondary materials that are now hosted on a NeoCities fan site called the Nerve Tower. in the time since we played the PS1 version, the Sega Saturn version, which is way better than the PS1 version and shorter, so play that one if you want to. That one has been patched to be available in English. So definitely do that. Yeah. Baroque kicks ass. Baroque is a cool game that I liked a lot. And I'm like one of the few people that has a Let's Play of the original Baroque on YouTube. So, yeah, go give that a look. Because I think that was one of our funner games, and it was a pretty chill playthrough where I just kind of played it at the end of the day while I was like eating. That was still old format, so it looks a little bit different, but yeah. Rishin says, I played Baroque on PS2 and bounced off its difficulty. The PS2 remake of Baroque is still on the agenda for things that I want to cover sometime. It is very different. It's extremely, extremely different than the original, but similar in a lot of ways. It still is a roguelite, but yeah, really interesting kind of dungeon crawler, neat game. Really excited to play more. Play the remake of that came out on PS2 and Wii sometime in the future. Max Payne 1 and 2 probably put right around Baroque. Max Payne 1 and 2 are pretty good games. I think Max Payne 1 is probably a little bit better than Max Payne 2. There were things I liked more about Max Payne 2, but Max Payne 2, despite being shorter, felt weirdly longer in the tooth. Aside from the weird buggy final boss fight that I had where things weren't aiming correctly in Max Payne 1, it was really cool to play a third-person shooter that kind of examined the state of video game storytelling at the time that these two games came out. The PS2 era was where we really started dipping our toes into that sort of 3D aping movies cinematic style. But it wasn't without its own identity, with its influence with like comic books and like Brubaker, trade paperbacks and things like that. Like really interesting neo-noir by Sam Lake. And I think lots of people would agree that these games like stand the test of time and are really solid games that are worth playing. Another case where playing on stream is really weird. Commentating over a third-person shooter that is simultaneously really story-driven but also really just like arena combat focused is a little bit hard. So my commentary in those playthroughs I'm not super proud of. Not because I like said anything bad in them or anything, just because it was like I'm shooting people, die, woohoo. Those are just hard games to commentate. So is what it is. But that's Max Payne 1 and 2. I wish I had more to say about them. They're going to be airing as part of the Remedy Connected Universe VODs when they go live. I don't know when that's going to be. I'm scheduled for like a year in advance on YouTube, so. Alan Wake remastered. We'll put it here-ish. I'm actually going to the more that I'm doing this, the more it like makes me want to these things together. Let's put that. Yeah, that's better. Probably something like that, right? Maybe that. Yeah, something like that. Alan Wake remastered, a little bit better than the two Max Payne games, but around the same quality. We just finished Alan Wake remastered on stream. Most people will know my take on this, but I actually don't like this game very much, personally. But I do respect a lot of the things that it did. I think it is unfortunate that it's just so barren. It's a game that is so concretely made out of such a charming idea, such an interesting story hook. Of a writer who changes the world around him and he's looking for his wife. But in terms of actual characterization and actual narrative, so little happens in Alan Wake. I can genuinely summarize the plot of that game in a single sentence, and then you could go play Control and Alan Wake 2 and not be missing anything. And a lot of people doubted me when they said that. They were like, oh, surely there's going to be a lot of stuff in Alan Wake 1 that will contextualize what's going on in Alan Wake 2. Then I played it on stream, and you all seem to agree with me that just not a lot happens in Alan Wake 1. From a plot or really a narrative perspective, Alan doesn't really change as a person from the start of Alan Wake 1 to the end of Alan Wake 1. His wife doesn't really change. Barry doesn't really change. Even the evil darkness just sort of doesn't do anything. And it's kind of a bummer. Now, I think narratively, it's interesting because it's like a fun concept, right? Of the story, and it's got fun characters that banter, but the way that it delivers these characters and the way that it establishes this world is so clearly a product of a development cycle that did not go well, that I think that it overall still feels like the shell of a game. It's like the reason why people like Alan Wake and why we've always been holding the torch for it and wanting a sequel is because it had promise. Not because the game itself was amazing, but because the promise of the game and the promise of what would come next was so alluring. And we just didn't quite get there with Alan Wake 1. I feel very similarly between Alan Wake 1 and Alan Wake 2 as I do The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2. Similar quality gap. Weird that those are both survival horror games. Sort of. Alan Wake 1 isn't really survival horror, but... Let's talk about... Let's bang out some more easy ones, huh? Friends versus Friends. Put it right around here. Friends versus Friends is a delightful, if a little bit content shallow when I played it, for 2v2 4-person arena shooter. It's the best game to play with friends. Get 4 friends in a group and just shoot each other, deathmatch each other. Feels like playing Quake, but with cool, not roguelike, but like deck building mechanics in it. So much fun. It's furry. The creators love furries. They reblog furry art all the time. Reblog, retweet, whatever. Friends vs. Friends, so much fun. Great soundtrack, great character designs. Really just fun time. Really dynamic. Easy way to lose 5 hours just like playing deathmatch with your friend. Reminds me of playing Time Splitters. Like it's like Time Splitters 2 again. Best way to describe that, really. It's just like it's a fun, old school deathmatch, Quake-like arena shooter with some cool deck building mechanics. Super cheap too. Always goes on sale. They're constantly adding new content to it. It's a game that's gonna live forever. Very Binding of Isaac in that way. Let's do Beyond Good and Evil. BG&E is pretty good. It's probably around here. Yeah. BG&E is a pretty fun Zelda clone for the GameCube era. Like Alan Wake, it has a lot of promise that it does not deliver on. But what is there is really fun and really flavorful. It feels like watching a French-Canadian animated TV show or a French animated TV show, right? Like it's got that fun comic booky, furry sci-fi Mobius aesthetic. But in terms of gameplay, it's a pretty rote Zelda clone in lieu of like an Ocarina of Time or a Neopets The Darkest Fairy. Like those kinds of games. Very much what Beyond Good and Evil is. Action-adventure games that don't have a jump button but do have you jump. Right? Does Beyond Good and Evil have a jump button? I don't remember. Anyway, good game. It ends on such a cliffhanger to the point where like when it happened, I was like, wait, that's it? Not because I really wanted more, but because it genuinely felt like there should have been a scene after when it ended. So I definitely get the people who, like with Alan Wake, have been really championing a sequel for as long as they'll allow Ubisoft to edge them and gaslight them into believing one will come. Because I do not think that we're actually ever going to see BG&E 2, but still, cool game. Really cool game. Wish there were more games like that. Very similar to a Ratchet and Clank kind of vibe, but or like even like a Sly Cooper kind of vibe, but much more Zelda in its execution. So fun game. Go check that out. PC version runs pretty well now, so you just got to patch it with a fan patch. It's all good. Darkest Dungeon. We've been playing this. This one's really hard to rate. Probably there. Yeah, probably here. How do I summarize my feelings on Darkest Dungeon? I don't love roguelikes. Or roguelites. I don't love this kind of dungeon diving game. I think that a lot of the reliance on RNG is really bad. I think that the resource economy is too strict. I think that the DLC is weird. And I think that it is too punishing for the kinds of risks it wants you to take and feel cool, like to justify those moments of success. That being said, when Darkest Dungeon works, it works really well. It is very fun. It's a very fun tightrope to balance. It is a game that you have to play by its rules, which I always appreciate. That actually might push it up a little bit. Yeah, maybe it's like around there. It's a game you have to play by its rules. It's a very fun game to play for a crowd, where you all can just, I name my people after you, and then you get your own little stories, and we get fun little things. And, in that, it does what World of Horror does, but better, where it's like you can understand a mechanic, and it always has the same right answer. But the Metroid brainia of it, of like learning what works and what doesn't work, and the exploratory nature of trying things and succeeding or being punished, when the balance is right, it is so right. So that's probably somewhere around here where I would put Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon is also a game that, while I think playing it on stream is actually kind of hard, you all seem to like it, so I get a lot of satisfaction from playing it on stream because it gets a lot of viewership. Speaking honestly, like that's the best thing for the channel, is getting sustained long-term viewership. The best thing you can do to help me out is get people to watch my stream. Or like, honestly, truly is the most important. So Darkest Dungeon has been very important for the channel and growing the channel. A lot of you regulars who are sitting in my chat right now talking, you first started appearing and actually participating in Darkest Dungeon. So I understand that it is a fan favorite, and I do appreciate it for that, and I really like it. So highly recommended. Darkest Dungeon is a game that I would play on my own. I would play it just on my Switch in bed or on my Steam Deck. Like, I think it's a good game. I think it's worth playing. What else do we want to do? Black Sad. What is with adventure games being so terrible? Like, so many modern adventure games are bad. Black Sad, especially as it gets near the end, has just an absolutely nonsense story. It just really falls apart by the end. Doesn't really feel as good or as consciously written as the Black Sad comics. It is one of technically the worst performing video games I have ever played on my PC. Its port is awful, just awful. I published by the same publisher as the Sherlock Holmes games, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Allegedly. There, I can't be sued. Black Sad, just not good. It was so hard to stream this game. It was crashing my OBS constantly. It was hardly running for Keith and I. Just like trying to even play the game, it seemed like it did not want us to play it. Really, really bad time. The only saving grace is that it's short and it's easy. At least as long as it's functioning, which was not very often. Let's see. I'll put Overwatch 2 on here because I did play it this year. I quit playing it this year. Overwatch 2 is probably like right around here. Overwatch 2 is a decent competitive game. I just don't like it. I just don't like the way that it plays. I think that it is very reliant on a very boring and stale meta. Even as character meta changes, I feel like the way that you play that game and the way that it exists as a shooter is just not... It's like constantly changing, but in the least interesting way. It's so nitty gritty. And I'm saying this as someone who plays fighting games. Like, I like needing to know frame data and needing to be skilled and having technical execution. Overwatch 2 is a game where it is more oftentimes a knowledge check than it is a skill check in low ranks. And it just feels like you hardly get to play the game, and the process of learning it is a nightmare. It has worse tools to learn the game than a fighting game does, which I think is shocking. It baffles me. It breaks my brain that people think that first-person shooters are more accessible than fighting games. I do not get it. Fighting games are structured play spaces where rules are constant. What works mathematically works. And FPS games are chaos, and is no more is that apparent than in a game like Overwatch. So that's where Overwatch 2 is. Balance is bad. It's fine. The way characters interact can be interesting sometimes until you get patched and the characters fundamentally change. I don't think it's good. I don't think Overwatch 2 is particularly good. It was a fun game to try to learn, to give an honest college try at, but I did not like it very much, and I don't think it was really worth putting that much time into. I wish I had done other things. That made me feel sad. Vampire Survivors. Probably right here. Vampire Survivors is the most frictionless video game I have ever played. It's not bad. It's just not good either. In fact, it's almost like not playing a video game. I played it on a cruise on my Steam Deck. And it was a way I passed the time. That's all I have to say about it. I unlocked everything. I got every single character. I did everything with every character, and then I uninstalled it, and I never thought about it ever again. That's all I got. It's fine. Where is the next game? Pentiment. This one's gonna make people upset. I think Pentiment is like just okay. Here's the thing with Pentiment. Pentiment is beautifully written, expertly researched. I don't think it benefits from any of its video game systems. Pentiment could be a really good movie. Pentiment could be a really good book. Pentiment could be an amazing comic book. I don't think adding RPG systems and letting us customize our Andreas and our Magdalene are meaningful. I don't think any of the changes that we make to the story really change any of the things that game is saying, and I don't think it really plays into what the game is doing. It paints a perfect picture, not to make a pun, of what Bavarian life is and the different nuanced views of Bavarian life, and it could have done that without most of its gameplay contrivances. I think a lot of the interactions in that game are really just there for aesthetics, to show you, to demonstrate visually what certain lifestyle things are right. Like, I don't understand why we had to do the mini games like eating dinner, because yeah, it gives us some tangibility, but all we're doing in that is seeing that, like, yes, they ate almonds and cheese, and that was a whole dinner for a family like that in the Bavarian countryside. The only benefit I get from having to play that and interact with that is that I see it, which can also be demonstrated in book form or in film form. Ludo-narratively, I don't know how much value there is in the gameplay of Pentiment, and that's why I keep it pretty low. Now, I really love the story. None of this is talking about the story. If we were just ranking video game stories and the subtlety and the nuance of video game stories, Pentiment would be up here. But I think that games need to have both and do both well. Pentiment's story is amazing. Everything else about it is just kind of arbitrarily a video game. And I don't really think that that's that great. Like, there's a lot of just time padded walking around, and you can convey that same longing tone and passage of time in a film with just scenes, like shots of nature and people walking around, and with your scene pacing. I don't need to just run back and forth between a town looking for what pixel I need to press to progress the plot. Like, every aspect of Pentiment that succeeds is made worse by the fact that it's a video game. So while I do like it a lot as a story, and I think that it is amazing that Obsidian made this super well-researched, academic, basically edutainment game, and it's as good as it is, and I'm ranking it really highly in my list, I still don't know how much I care about having played it. Do I want more games like it that do what it does better than it? Yes. Do I think Pentiment is quite the epitome of that yet? No. Again, if we're talking about nuanced character writing and subtlety and historical value, Pentiment is way higher on the list. But as a cohesive whole, as a product that someone may buy, kind of lower priority for me. You want to talk about some interesting games? Funger and Funger 2. Funger and Funger 2, I played these on Keith's channel. These are the most interesting indie JRPGs I have played ever, maybe. Holy crap, right? These games have insane structural design. I honestly don't even know what to say about them. A lot of people, thanks to Super Eye Patch Wolf's video, will wrongly claim that Fear and Hunger is an immersive sim, and I think that is incorrect. I do not think it's an immersive sim, but I do think it's a Metroidvania, and I do think that the more you understand these games, the more you can route around them. And the actual game of playing Fear and Hunger is not the experience of pushing the buttons on the controller, but is the experience of working the meta out and figuring out how the game is best optimized. And a lot of that fun is enabled by the fast deaths and loads of that game. But I think the whole, and this goes for both Fear and Hunger 1 and 2, so much of those games is just fuck you design that doesn't actually do anything to further the themes of the game. Like, the game wants to set up the themes of this like oppressive world that doesn't care about you, that you need to have like your own power to push through and achieve your goals against all odds. But it also just punishes you to be edgy. That goes for both Funger and Funger 2 and Termina. Termina is less bad about this, but it also breaks its own rules constantly. It still is an RPG. Like, it's still a JRPG. You're in party combat, you're taking turn-based turns, you're fighting enemies, etc. And yet some of those enemies and some of the rules and the mechanics just don't apply. And the exceptions in these cases don't make the rule, because you're never given, like, people will say, like, it's just a game you need to think about and think through and you'll figure it out. But there is no thinking through, oh, I can't guard this character's coin flip because arbitrarily he is just the worst, like, he just is the most powerful character in the game and guarding against his coin flip does nothing. You can't figure that out unless you try it and then just die and reload and lose a bunch of progress. It would be different if it was like, all right, this game is consistently making it so that enemies 2 times my size, even guarding against their coin flips, won't beat their coin flips. So there's a pattern here that if I pay attention, I get rewarded for paying attention to, and then I am powerful and I am able to exploit these systems. Unfortunately, this game is just like, actually, fuck you. You can't guard this one. Teehee, reload, go back, do it again. We're oppressive and the world is hard. Which isn't, it's just not, it honestly cheapens a lot of the things that this game does. But the good things about these games are that they're massively ambitious, interesting video games that do a lot more than a lot of other indie games even try to do. Slag says, which character in Termina has an unblockable coin flip? The tank. As far as I know. Keith and I blocked it with block, and then it killed us anyway. So unless that's a glitch, it's on the playthrough. You can go watch it. So that's annoying. But yeah. So Funger is just, it's just interesting. It's a game that I wish was better than it was because I love everything it's doing. And I have an insane amount of respect for Miro Havarinen, I think is his name. Orange, the creator of the game, he's watched our playthrough. Apparently, he retweeted it. So he likes our stuff. I think those games are incredible achievements, just like really great indie games. But the way people talk about them is absolutely hyperbolic and superlative. I'm very looking forward to a Fear and Hunger 3 that maybe has a little bit more budget, that like maybe catches like a publisher's eye. And so it has like good editing and isn't buggy and doesn't crash all the time and has a more consistent design that really sinks into the things that make Termina and Funger 1 good. Because as much as I love those games, and even though I'm ranking them low on this list, does not mean I don't love them. I want them to be better. Funger and Termina are without a doubt the most memorable games I played this year. Even over things like Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. I do not think they are as good as those games. But I do think that they're interesting and they are worth playing. So if you have the stomach for them, because they have incredibly... you need an iron stomach to play those games. They have a lot of content in them, if you know what I mean by that. Not a lot of great things happen in those games. You will get a very enriching experience out of them. You just have to also be really willing to deal with genuinely dumb bullshit that isn't as clever as it thinks it is. The biggest example of this is also just RNG. The fact that the game is all about planning routes, except all of the containers are RNG, is just like, I guess you just reload until you get the item you need. Like, that's the game encourages that. Just do it. Get a leg up on the competition. That's how you beat the game. Yes, there are ways to beat it with like the worst characters in the worst conditions. But again, that's a level of meta and luck that the game itself is not necessarily about. It constructs an interesting emergent narrative around those things from a meta level. But as a game, I don't think the game actually wants you to just be reloading all the time. That is more a strategy that people have developed to make the game less rough around the edges when it could be sharp in the right places. So that's how I feel about Funger. I'm very glad I played them. Some of the best gaming time I had this year was playing those games. We're getting down to the dregs. Some of the worst times I've ever had playing a video game. Project Zomboid. This game is interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like around here. Interesting simulation. Unique multiplayer game. Fun to fuck around in. Just like World of Horror struggles with being surprisingly shallow for how deep the systems are. Once you figure out what to do, you kind of just do it. Always. The same way every time. And playing in multiplayer, this is really exacerbated because obviously you're going to be playing with mods and stuff and with characters and with your friends, and the entire balance of the game switches. And it's like, it's a social game. It's like playing Fortnite, but it's not particularly enjoyable. And it's really buggy and really weird. It is cool. I really liked Project Zomboid in theory. It's just as a game to play with no real end goal, it's not particularly engaging, which is my problem with it, I think. Yeah, I might move it. I'll probably move it down here. Not particularly engaging. Very neat, though. Yeah, so Petword says Project Zomboid, I think, is an excellent foundation. It really needs NPCs, dynamic stuff going on in the world. I agree. It needs like NPCs, not like literal story NPCs, but like random events and interesting stuff to make things worth exploring. And I think, honestly, like an end point. Like, if it was like survive 2 winters so that all the zombies die out and rebuild civilization, and then the threats change over time from zombies to humans and military efforts and things like that, and you have to have like a more engaged involvement in creating a community, that could be really cool, especially in like an online server where you have lots of different people doing PvP. But where it stands right now, it's kind of not even finished, even though it's been out for like 8 years. So yeah, Petword says it seems like that's where they're going in terms of development. Can't wait to play that game in 2035. That's exactly how I feel about it. So yeah, that's Zomboid. Let's get some other easy ones out of the way. VTMB, what a fucking incredible video game. VTMB is a magical, wonderful time. Magical, wonderful time. One of the greatest games of all time, one of the most well-written games of all time. It's a nearly perfect RPG. I really don't know what to say. It's up there. This would be where Baldur's Gate 3 is if we did this list in 2004. It's actually pretty high up there. I might put it up there. Baldur's Gate 3 is huge. And Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is small, but feels similar in scope. That's, I think, what I want to say about that. Is like where Baldur's Gate 3 is massive and all-encompassing. It's, Baldur's Gate 3 is sort of the Uber game. It's kind of every game put into one in like a really satisfying way. Vampire the Masquerade focuses on being a lot of one really good thing very broadly within a very small context. It has issues. It's a very, very buggy game. It's a very unfinished game. It took 10 years for it to get fan patched enough that it feels like a fully cohesive experience. And even then, there's a lot of cut content and unfinished content that still remain in the build. It's funny. It's got a sense of humor. It doesn't take itself seriously, but it also comments on a lot of stuff. It has a lot of things to say. And granted, a lot of those things are from its era, 2004, type George Bush, era video gaming protest game. But overall, it's just anytime you talk about it, someone's going to install it again. Someone's going to go back through it. It's got so many diverging paths, so many fun different ways to play. The community loves it so much. You can do lots of really dynamic things. It is almost ImSim-esque in the kinds of things that you can pull off. It's not quite that open, but boy, was that the gold standard before Disco Elysium and Baldur's Gate 3 came out. In terms of CRPGs, you owe it to yourself to play Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Definitely one of the best tabletop adaptations of all time as well. It was really special game. Thief. Thief is amazing. We're gonna put Thief like up here. I know it's probably shocking to see me do this because I love Castlevania. And I'm not even fully finished with Thief yet. But Thief is probably my favorite game that we have played on the channel in the past few months. Other than like Alan Wake. I love Thief. I was not expecting to like this game as much as I do. I was not expecting the level design to be as impressive as it is after nearly 20 years of existing. This game is crazy. It's one of the best stealth games I've ever played. And it still is doing more with just really basic stealth and level design than most modern stealth games. It's the grandpappy of the modern immersive sim. Real huge classic. Lots of lineage and love between System Shock and Thief and BioShock and Deus Ex. So I'm sure that we'll play more ImSims on the channel because they seem to do well. But Thief so far, it's getting great viewership. I'm enjoying playing it. It's got really interesting aesthetics. It's got like a genuinely cool fantasy universe that I like a lot. So, yeah, Thief is dope. Thief is a cool game. Of course, we're talking about Thief Gold, Thief the Dark Project, not the reboot. Who's Lila? The best adventure game we've played all year, though, since the start of the channel. Who's Lila's crazy. It's an ARG unfiction, chaotic fiction product that emulates DS games, but like also is just a really compelling treatise on like surrealist narratives and absurdism and how we engage with media and character and how we take ownership over like theories and discourse. I have so many ideas about this game and so many things I want to say, but ultimately outside of a few frustrations with it in the moment of it just being kind of like arbitrary and wild to deal with while playing, Whose Lila just kicks ass. It is easily up there with Alan Wake 2 when it comes to just being like creative, just raw creative experience. Let's do Lobotomy Corp. Probably right there. Lobotomy Corp is cool. It's like Darkest Dungeon, but harder, I guess. I like it a lot. It's tough. It has a lot of weird difficulty spikes, but I feel my brain expanding while I play it. It feels like knowledge is everything in that game, but ultimately, I do think that it struggles against the fact that it's trying to do so much and be so punishing. I know a lot of people said like, "Oh, Project Moon has a lot of difficulty spikes in their games," but I don't know if that's intentional. I feel like they just make hard games and are kind of bad at balance. But in this case, Lobotomy Corp is like the origin. It's like the genesis of a lot of their ideas and a lot of their it's like the birthplace of their game design, I think, in a lot of ways. And even just playing Lobotomy Corp and then what I've played of Limbus, it's interesting to see it evolve, because Limbus in a lot of ways is very similar to a refined, like the way you think about things in Lobotomy Corp is the same way you think about things in Limbus, in terms of your decision making and like how you pick characters and skills, and like the amount of like mental stack going on where you're like, okay, how what do I need to do here to survive whatever is going to happen to me? Like what are my resources and who do I always need to look out for? It's the same. The difference is that Lobotomy Corp is turn-based, or not. Lobotomy Corp isn't turn-based. So I like that. I like Lobotomy Corp a lot. I'm excited to play more. Maybe my feelings will change as I have more experience with it. But cool. That leaves one game, and I think it's the game that a lot of people were waiting for me. The video game that a lot of people were waiting for me to talk about, and it's the game I want to talk about the least. That's Password. Password is the visual novel that Keith and I have been playing in the visual novel slot on his channel for the past 4 months, I think. I don't like Password, but my dislike of Password is not where my critique of Password comes from. I think Password is a very ambitious game that wants to do a lot of things and wants to please a lot of people. And I think I was sort of predisposed to not liking this game because I don't think that you can make something for everyone. I think when you make something for everyone, you make something for no one. And I think that a game like Password represents everything that is wrong with the sort of opt-in process of participating in a fandom and its subcultures. Not because Password itself as a novel is about these things, but because all of Password's flaws come from the fact that it was written for an audience that was already there, that were opting into it on faith, and who came to it wanting to love it, and as a result were not able to see it for what it was or provide the necessary criticism to refine it into something better. Password has a lot of problems, and a lot of the problems are writing problems. But it's not because the creator of Password is a bad writer. In fact, there's a lot of really good stuff in Password that works really well. Password has bad writing because it's trying to do so many things and also trying to constrain them to a format that it does not fit, while also needing to lean on homage and expectation and player desires to make people stick along and pay off what Patreon wanted from it, and to pay off the needs of a very fickle and, for lack of a better word, undiscerning, which is the worst combination you can be, is fickle and undiscerning audience that wanted many different things from it. And as a result, Password becomes a utterly nonsensical, toothless narrative that is ultimately very, very void of personally successful creative storytelling. And that's really harsh feedback that I don't want to give about a furry visual novel where I am 1 degree of separation away from the creator. Because I think that the creator of this novel can do great things. And I think that Password is an incredible amount of effort that deserves commendation. And I think that it is hard to make a novel. I am literally in the process of writing one. And I will not even begin to say that I think that I can even deliver on half of what Password does. I do not have faith that I can do that because it's fucking hard. So Password frustrates me as a story, but really, Password just makes me sad as a failed project. And that's my feeling on Password. Yeah. So this is my tier list, my review of every single game I played in the calendar year of 2023. Fingers crossed I'm not forgetting anything. This is a whole list. I am so proud of myself. I'm so proud of everything that we were able to get through. I'm so proud of the community that we formed here. It's been so much fun. It's been so much fun doing all of this with all of you. And, you know, it's changed the way that I play video games, right? Like, I've been streaming for a little bit more than a year, and now I look forward more to streaming a game than I do to playing it by myself, and that matters a lot to me. One of the reasons why I started streaming was because I was sick of my time disappearing. I was playing games by myself and thinking about them, and I had all these thoughts about them, but I had no way to voice them and no one to share them with. And it would be like I would be hit with this profound art, like The Last of Us Part 2 or something, and it would hit me and it would emotionally impact me really hard and it would motivate me and inspire me. But then 6 months later, the only record or the only proof I had of that emotional resonance and that connection I had with those things was my memory, my very faulty, fleshy memory of what the experience of playing that was. And that's meaningful. It's important to have things just for yourself like that. But this has been an experience of sharing something and cataloging something and quantifying things and putting myself out there that I really had never had an opportunity to do before. So I want to thank you all for being here, for the massive amount of games we played this year. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we played about 70 games this year. Holy smokes. So yeah, I can't wait to play 70 more games next year, maybe beat the record. Who knows? We're kind of not we're not on pace for that right now because of how busy the start of the year has been, but maybe we'll get there. Maybe if I can go full time doing this, I can dedicate more time to streaming with you all. So anyway, this has been a pleasure. Thanks for watching me make my 2023 year in review tier list. Go play some of these games. Play Alan Wake 2, play Baldur's Gate 3. Get out there.